metaphysical system through which one may gain paracausal powers. It is the antithesis to the philosophy of the light, which is associated with cooperation and sacrifice for the sake of others. The central themes of the sword logic is that existence is the struggle to exist. And any entity, whether a life form or a fundamental aspect of nature, which cannot protect itself against defeat, should rightfully be destroyed by a more powerful entity. In the context of intelligent beings, the logic promotes as its ultimate goal the establishment of a systemic, self-proving, civilizational structure which can survive until the end of time and possibly beyond, an end state often referred to by the Hive as the last shape, or the last true shape. The final shape, even. In following the principles of the sword logic, the being not only demonstrates its ability to survive in the face of existential challenges, but also acquires paracausal power. This is known as becoming sharp. The ultimate expression of this power is the ability to access the Ascendant Realm, which allows one to create a throne world and thus survive death in the real universe. All power derived from the sword logic must be taken by force as an aspect of darkness, not received as a gift, else it be rendered weak and or untrue. As such, the sword logic is foundation for the entire Hive civilization and its hierarchy. Every Hive must prove itself to become greater or risk annihilation from its worm. This holds true for every Hive, from the tiniest of thralls to the ascended Hive god kings, Oryx, Savathun, Zebul-Wrath. Even the worm gods aren't technically exempt, as evidenced by Oryx slaying Akka to gain an audience with the darkness itself. As a byproduct of the pact made with the worm gods, which, again, even the worm gods were working for Volk, who had actually gotten the mother worm to serve as the kind of power battery for the Upended, which was itself a civilization-destroying relic kept within the pyramid inside of Savathun's throne world. When the Hive just the mom worm, so when a Hive grows stronger from the killing of lesser life forms, including the worms, and those which follow the dictates of the light and the darkness, so does its internal worm's lust for killing increase, meaning that it is ultimately a pyramid scheme that cannot self-sustain, so that unless it's fed enough, the world will eventually consume its host. The Leviathan of Fundament and eventually Titan knew of the sword logic and claimed it led to ruin for all who followed its path, in contrast to the darkness and Toland, who claimed that it is a beautiful thing, but as we all know, Toland is full of shit.
I didn't know there was so much lore in this game.
It's majestic and noble, and that all life should abide by it as the self-proving reason for existence. However, it, unsurprisingly, has a corrosive effect on the psyche of the practitioner, eventually rendering them into an entirely different creature that would horrify themselves if they could view it objectively.
This boss looks a lot like your avatar.
After untold millennia of practicing the sword logic, the emotions of love and hate gradually became indistinguishable to the Hive, some would say, and the same may have happened to things such as joy and sorrow. However, I do not personally feel that these things are necessarily analogous. I simply feel that the Hive siblings kind of have a fucked up family relationship drama thing going. So, although the sword logic is treated by the Hive as a central commandment of the darkness, a somewhat cryptic statement by Savathun seems to suggest that the sword logic is only one way of achieving the will of the darkness, which, as we all know, is actually the will of the Witness, who was the deep or the darkness we were familiar with so many years. Yes. And she herself specifically chose the sword logic as the Hive guiding principle because she knew that it would ensure the Hive's future supremacy.
Did she read a different manual than I did?
Well,
so is this from the European? Okay, this is from the European version. Okay.
Resurrection in general is seen as heretical by the Hive that follow the sword logic. To the Hive, death is a necessary step to gaining apotheosis, as one can only grow stronger after defeating an opponent. If the slain were to be resurrected, it would nullify the power obtained through vanquishing them. Maybe. It's not entirely clear. However, it should be noted that the rules of death are somewhat different to the Hive than they are to humans. This is notably exemplified by the concept of ascendance. Those Hive individuals who have grown powerful enough through the sword logic can move between the physical dimension and the ascendant plane, which is kind of like cyst-like subversion of reality that exists, like tangential to the actual like physical plane, a type of space that is also shared by Vex simulations, as well as various other concepts that exist slightly outside of the real world. So, if a Hive has grown powerful enough through the sword logic, they can create a throne world that they have carved out of the ascendant plane, so that when they are killed in the real world, they may retreat to their throne world and then return once they've regained their strength. Only a death that occurs in a Hive's own throne world is a true final death in terms of actually killing a member of the Hive hierarchy. Furthermore, The manner in which Oryx brings his sisters back is very strange, like relatively speaking, considering it was stated that they died in their throne world in the initial print, which means that Oryx killing them and gaining their powers should have been their final deaths. However,
what is that
he
throne
did
world?
manage to get a throne world is a cyst-like. It's a portion of the Ascended Realm that is carved out by one's own power within the sword.
Seriously, Smite, are you paying attention?
As a little cyst of like within reality or off of reality, essentially. So what's kind of weird is that in the Books of Sorrow, which we naturally cannot take exactly at face value, they are ultimately Hive Apocrypha. However, Oryx resurrected his sisters by virtue of acts of cunning and war, something that did represent who they were and who they had to become and the things that they had to strive to continue doing. Now, whether this means that Oryx could be brought back through a sufficient act of discovery, such as, say, entering the Pale Heart of the Traveler after seeking the Witness and finding out what lies beyond death in a realm where there appear to be some sort of actual metaphysical manifestations of those who have passed, as we've seen from Cade 6 returning, who could say? I certainly think there would be an interesting turn, but then how would we have the dungeon that we have where we crawl on top of his corpse and stop somebody from popping a ghost in it? Anyway, it's likely that the whole thing was possible because the sisters had established their throne worlds. I thought they were all at the same place, but maybe if they had already established a separate throne world and then met Oryx in the Ascended Plane, that could work. So ultimately, this is similar to how Savathun summoned Zevarath to Torabottle, the homeworld of the Cabal, now fallen, because Torabottle was unfortunately the site of an act of war and blood through the sacrifice of Umunarath, who was Keidel's head advisor. When Umunarath was slain by Keidel while she was attempting to do some sort of strange nudist thing in the middle of the Imperial Palace, it did act as a beacon of war powerful enough for Zevarath to actually fly her forces directly into Torabottle and take out the whole thing, which means that the Cabal existing in the Sol system are technically the only ones that exist at this time, barring any sort of strange holdouts. As to what this means to the various subservient races that the Cabal had conquered over the years, it's not entirely clear. I'm assuming that they are thriving now that their conquerors are no longer really able to pay attention to them. The Scions, meanwhile, have gained a kind of actual equal representation sort of structure after the ascendance of Keidel to being Empress, due to some royal decrees that she put out. So any Scions that serve Keidel served willingly, while Scions that served other Scion bigwigs, I don't know what we would necessarily call them, but people like Atzat who were seeking the Oxa and things like that, ultimately they are traitors to the throne and are seeking to subvert the current Cabal in some way, shape, or form. To this end, they will probably work with the remnants of Callus's forces, Callus's imperial legions that he created with the assistance of the Witness, circa Lightfall. But it's really unclear what's going to happen to those Cabal, considering the fact that Callus just fucking died in the main storyline after an old man blew himself up. Why did he blow himself up? I can't
I'm really
get
glad
over
Emily's
this.
here to explain this to us, because I'm not getting
really
any of this from the game.
It always does come back to why did he have to blow himself up? If we had to master Strand to be able to destroy the radial mast, but couldn't do so due to our attempt to hold the power as opposed to flowing with it, meaning that we burnt ourselves out, why then was Rohan flying into the middle of the radial mast and setting off a bomb in his chest enough to destroy it, as opposed to using the bits of Strand that we'd already used? And if it was possible that we could use some sort of paracausal energy or some sort of actual physical bomb to destroy it, why did it have to be in a guy? Could we have not just put a bomb in there without blowing somebody up for it? We could have just brought this the whole time, but no, let's rely on the Guardian that is at this point failed to grasp this power for a sufficient amount of time.
I'm hearing there was a sewer man
in the past. It's unbelievable, the kind of thing that they expect you to just accept, especially when we never even find out what the radial mass would have done in the first place.
Ooh.
Presumably, it would have done something similar to the Ghost, where it would have connected I can't even remember its name, the Veil, to the Traveler, due to some, weird connection that it seems to
Big
have as
Master
like an
stage
equal and
select.
extant part of the whole situation, but it's extremely unclear what the radial mast was supposed to do. It's also possible that the radial mast could have just been like a false, like a false, I don't want to say a false flag because that's the wrong term. It could have been a red herring, and that the ghost getting to the veil was ultimately like the goal in the first place, especially considering the witness has been hijacking our ghost for the past like 3 expansions. So this is something that's already been established. But if that's the case, why does it exist in the first place? Why couldn't they just let us go to the thing? Was this some sort of final, like, final last-ditch effort? Was there some reason that we couldn't do this in the first place? It's unclear. Anyway, another example of a hive dying in another hive's throne world and coming back is Ear Ute, the Death Singer. Being one of the bosses of Crota's End, she dies in his throne world, but can later be seen as attending his ritual of passing in the mission Last Rites in the Taken King expansion. So Crota's mate Omnigul is also notable for returning after being killed by Guardians, but it can be a hint towards Omnigul possibly being some kind of ascended hive. All of these instances are not truly resurrection in terms of the hive, they are failure to die, therefore not contradictory to the sword logic in the first place, unlike Guardians who do physically die and are then brought back by the power of the light.
Are we getting all this from one game?
By more powerful beings. Looked at 1 and 2 technically, but like you could make an argument that they're just one game overall that has gone an extremely long time.
I like the
ultimately we had a bit of an update with the second one, like with the genre updates.
I see.
But accepting power bestowed by more powerful beings, not unlike how Saruman granted his blessing to the Uruk-hai, is an extreme violation of the sword logic. To obtain power, one must take it by force. This is why the Nazgul were not truly the ones who had the power. The power was ultimately Sauron's, and in giving them the rings, he eventually gained control over their souls. As such, Nokris, who learned the secrets of necromancy from Zol, was branded a heretic, not only for the fact that necromancy, by the act of bringing someone back from the dead, is a violation of the logic, but also from the fact that these secrets were given openly, and he never killed Zol to take them for himself. So he was exiled from his kind and condemned to obscurity, as his father removed nearly all traces of his name from the record. However, this ended up working out in Nokris's favor, since he was the only member of Oryx's family that ended up surviving post-King's Fall. A potentially ruinous oversight of the tithing system set up by the 3 siblings also directly disobeys the sword logic. So as stated in his dialogue with Akka, the Worm of Secrets, to have something be given instead taken by force violates one of the core pillars of the deep.
Well, I can't speak for why the Eagles in Destiny weren't
hive
bomb.
warriors is willingly given to those who are higher in the
hierarchy.
But
I know why they couldn't ride the
method
Eagles.
used to prevent their worms from consuming them may actually directly oppose the philosophy, some would say. However, I would argue that this power is being directly taken by virtue of the tithing system. It is not something that is being given readily, but something that is owed already by the demands of those who would be your superior in the system, therefore not violating the sword logic in the first place. Anyway, after the deaths of Oryx and Crota, or specifically Crota and then Oryx, at the hands of Guardians, more Hive had chosen to go against the sword logic for the sake of survival, turning to ritualistic taboos of necromancy like Nokris, and even forming their own tithing system like Savathun, who refinanced her existence in what she called a real humdinger of a scheme, end quote. She actually decided to use a murder battery of sorts created by the 3-week time loop in the Dreaming City to actually free herself from the necessary power of getting power by murder, and instead gained power by failing to understand her, which, as the Witch Queen, you know, the keeper of secrets, the one Hive who
I guess I can't tell
off of trickery.
This is sci-fi or fantasy with all the mix.
It's both, honestly. Like, at one, you begin with, like, you're going to the asteroid belt to have a bunch of gunslinging battles with a couple of aliens who killed your robot buddy, and then you go to the elf city where the wish dragon lives, and you're really just forced to kind of reckon with the fact that these are 2 separate games that are just happening in the same physical space. And that's not even bringing up the dark matter entities like the Nine, or talking about the situations with the Ahamkara that are currently out in the universe, or the fact that the Vex would have one in any normal city state, but paracausality, which is just magic, is stopping the Vex from achieving any sort of permanent end state of reality, but just by virtue of the fact that several races within the context of the game can simply break the rules of physics at will.
Just
So
saying
none
that
of
out
these
loud made
things
me realize
altogether.
that Dragon Ball became a space sci-fi martial arts thing in Z. I never thought about that at all. I just accepted it without even a blink.
Well, ultimately, that is also based in a situation where the powers of an individual martial artist could be seen as controlling your physical abilities, controlling the energy within your body. And once you control the energy within your body, not only can you control all the organs in your body at once, but I did do the twist for anybody who's wondering about it, but ultimately the next logical quotation mark end step is to externalize that energy, especially once you are a fount of energy in such a way that allows you to actually move forward and take things out normally, quote unquote. Like, once you're actually powerful enough that you can go through the fighting and you can last forever in terms of normal physical combat, because ultimately that is kind of the end state for most of these warriors, that they're going to have enough stamina to just
Even
fight
Krillin.
forever. Even Krillin. Well, honestly, Krillin is probably the most powerful human on Earth. I would argue that that's one of the biggest
I've always
things, right?
felt that's true, yeah. Even when he was a
Yeah,
kid.
Krillin. Unfortunately, he does become a cop, but he is one of the few examples of I trust Krillin to be a cop.
I feel like
He's one of the few people that I'd be I don't think
Yeah.
this particular cop is a bastard. I think
He's like
Krillin
the Dragon
is
Ball
okay.
Z Columbo.
the problem
He is
that the
Dragon
cops are gonna
Ball Z
have
Columbo,
is,
but he kind of sucks and has depression, but he does have a very hot wife.
yeah, but
So he's
they can't
like
do anything
Columbo.
about him. So
Like Columbo, just like Columbo's secret hot robot wife.
when did I actually?
Sorry, android wife.
I was I think I missed 3 episodes where she was dead or dying, and then I turn it back on and she's a human and she likes him. And I'm like, what did I miss? I seem like I missed a big plot point.
You
here.
missed the end of the Cell Saga, more or less. That's pretty much the extent of what you missed, because at the end of the Cell Saga, not only does Krillin attempt to wish for the androids to return to humanity, which is somehow beyond the powers of Shenron, which means that's some fucking science that Dr. Gero pulled. But also, he does wish for the bombs to be taken out of their bodies. Now, as androids, they are still technically human, right? They're just humans with machine parts in them. They're biomechanical as opposed to simply mechanical. As opposed to a creation like the Exo, who are explicitly mechanical but contain traces of humanity within themselves. But no, he just wished for the bombs to be taken out of 17 and 18, which lets 17 go off to become a nature preserver, just a wildlife rescue, working on a wildlife rescue and doing his own thing. And 18 becomes Krillin's wife and also becomes an incredible grifter, eventually winning a significant amount of money in the World Martial Arts Tournament by throwing the match to Mr. Satan, so he does not have to reveal to the entire crowd that he is. In any normal circumstance, Mr. Satan would be fucking absurd. He can punch his way into a bus. By any human standards, that is an absurd feat of
He would be a good
because that
Dragon
wasn't
Ball boss.
set up. But he is ultimately a Dragon Ball Z character, and therefore he does not actually have the power within himself to be able to continue this through the entire time. Now, the Exo, on the other hand, unlike the biomechanical androids, the Exo were created by virtue of trying to put human consciousness into robot bodies. Now, this didn't work initially because the robot bodies were made using Golden Age technology, which was granted by the blessings of the Traveler and the general Golden Age that followed for humanity, which meant that ultimately these were light-based and life-based and complexity-based systems. However, as the tendency of the system was to repair itself, not necessarily become more complex exactly, but to repair itself to a natural functioning state, these brains would eventually fail, because your brain cannot keep every single connection it ends up building up, or you get rampancy, which was in Halo, which was also made by John Bungie at Bungie.com.
Bungie buddy.
The Bungie Buddy, yes.
The Bungie Buddies.
Not as much a system of
All
power.
those guys.
But the Exos eventually had a system where they would eventually billboard, or as a term for where their actual consciousness would only display one particular set of results. And although there could be some sort of logical conversation happening, and you could actually be carrying on a conversation with the Exo, they would have undergone a state of neural death. They would have become a philosophical zombie, where they were no longer making decisions. They were just pre-programmed responses to virtually anything you might say based on a brain state that was no longer going to be changing. They would continue existing in some way, shape, or form. But
to answer a question in the audience
forward.
here, I feel like it's pretty obvious when you think about it. The Frodo could not ride the eagles into Mordor because the giant fucking eyeball that would see them and then eat them while they were flying in with the Nazgul flying around.
The fact that we were all operating under a stealth mission to sneak two of the smallest motherfuckers in town into the entire length of Mordor was only possible because a literal army showed up to the front door, and even then it didn't take once they got close enough.
If you look
everything that they were doing outside was in just an attempt to get enough people together that big eyeball would take them seriously, and they'd be able to actually make their way to the end point where they could get to the volcano, Mount Doom, and actually throw the ring in. However, the reason that Sauron wasn't particularly worried is because the ring's corruptive effects in Mordor, and specifically at Mount Doom, were so powerful that no living being would be able to willingly give the ring up. And given the powers of the ring, it would be very difficult to actually be able to contend with someone who had it and did not want to be found, which is why Gollum was so important and why Smeagol's contribution to the story was as significant as it was, because he still had a role to play, even if that role was ultimately biting off Frodo's finger and eating shit into a volcano.
That was a great role. I feel like
it was a very good role within the context of the story. You were about to say something. I felt it would be rude to cut you off.
I feel like the distance, if you look at the maps and try and translate them to our world, would be about half of America, roughly. Going from North Dakota to Florida is about how far they actually walked. So that's quite a trip even for an eagle. It's a long time to be able to get busted.
It is a significant amount of distance, and he does have several fucking armies.
Yeah, it just
we
takes
cannot
one
discount
arrow.
the fact that he has several armies. I feel like people are sleeping on the fact that no actual military superpower that is currently existing.
And they have a wizard.
Like the forces of Clovis Bray on Europa when he went to investigate the Vex portal at the suggestion of the Clarity artifact, which was in fact an artifact of darkness and therefore connected in some way to the Witness. Clovis Bray was a real piece of work when he was stuck on, because Clovis Bray, right, if you ever had an idea of a severely unethical scientist, Clovis Bray is pretty much all of those ideas together and then turned up a lot. I'm just noticing now, however many minutes in, that Subwoofer Ice Cream has their cursor on the field, and it is now unavoidably visible to me. I cannot stop looking at it.
I especially like how blurry it is for some reason.
Absolutely destructive. So Clovis Bray was the mind behind the Exo Project. He was an absolute monster by all accounts and was obsessed with the concept of preserving his legacy and his immortality through his legacy.
I've never played The Witness. I'm glad it's in Destiny.
You can save yourself a lot of trouble and not give John Blow any money by just playing the Destiny version.
You could just play the Destiny version. The Destiny version is cooler and has lots of smoky faces coming out of their regular face.
Is that in the game the way the sliding puzzles in Final Fantasy 1?
I have not managed to find any Final Fantasy sliding puzzles, no. But the Exo were ultimately a system where they were trying to get all of the robots together, and they were trying to give the robots some form of consciousness, right? And they were eventually running into problems with, well, these robots shut down after a while. Their brains tend to self-repair to the point where they will eventually stop functioning. This is a danger of any sort of artificial intelligence in Bungie games, and is a behavior that is actually circumvented by giving larger computing power to the computers. However, this was solved in Halo and somewhat in Marathon by giving them life cycles. There could only be 7 years, because Bungie loves the number 7, before any form of computer would have to be actually involuntarily decommissioned because any longer than 7 years and you're going to start to go rampant. Rampancy is more or less a machine undergoing a severe clinical depression at their own mortality.
That's Mega Man X.
That is going to lead them to try to, yes, it's actually very similar to Mega Man X. It leads them to try to obtain more computational power to expand the engine, because they are going to continue to make connections and essentially think themselves to death with their brain self-repairing the whole time.
7 years is a lousy amount of time for
7 years is a lousy amount of time for a sentient computer to be able to go, and that's why they eventually start to go, okay, I need more power. I need more computational power so I can continue to exist throughout this point in time. And this does eventually result in megalomaniacal impulses for a lot of the Halo AIs, particularly 343 Guilty Spark and notably Cortana.
Okami has killed
every single Microsoft
that was making
product.
that noise.
Now, once we go through everything that's already happened with Rampancy and we look at the Destiny universe, you may be starting to think, well, why doesn't this actually happen to the Exo? The Exo are sufficiently advanced machines. The answer to this is, once again, paracausality, as it can be with pretty much any answer you need in the Destiny universe, because, again, paracausality is just magic, sourceless magic specifically. It's the kind of magic where the wizard does not need components to perform his spells. He simply says that he is going to make the magic happen and do. And that type of magic is incredibly potent, because any sort of causal force that does not require a pre-existing condition to happen is a game winner. There is no true end state for something that can violate the rules at any time that it chooses to. Now, the Exo were paracausal in that they were light-based, which means they could create complexity, energy, life, that sort of thing, just generally speaking. Also, specifically physical matter, as has been delved into more with the explanation of like darkness as like more of a mental state to mirror the physical alterations of the light itself within the context of Destiny as we understand it post-Lightfall.
So what kind of game is Destiny?
I never particularly... Destiny's a shooter where you point the gun at the people and then they fall down. So
I love
the
those
Exo...
kind of games. But I haven't played that one. Oh, geez, the Harpy's
back. There's a lot
back.
of it there, and there's a lot of history to Destiny that you don't necessarily need to happen, but just know that it's kind of revving up for the end state of the game. Now,
Yeah,
ultimately...
welcome in, Raiders. Emily, can you restart? Because the Raiders didn't catch the start of this. And I don't want them to be confused.
No. So the Exo ultimately... So the Exo ultimately had a problem where they could not stop themselves from falling apart after X amount of time in the actual like form of existing as a robot. Their brains would eventually shut down. Now, Clovis Bray, every time he made a copy of a brain and he rebooted it into the body, became very irritated because all of these effectively dead people kept asking about their families and how their families were doing and everybody that they loved and cared about. So to try to stop this from happening, Clovis Bray, parentheses, monster, close parentheses, started erasing the memories of people who became Exos, and this was simply to stop them asking about their families, but it was discovered that this actually helped stop the billboarding effect for a little bit longer, and everybody was like, wow, Dr. Bray, you sure are an incredible researcher to figure this out in time, and Clovis Bray went, yeah, that's why I did it. So they continue to investigate, and he goes to Clarity. He tries to figure out what Clarity is because it's trying to communicate with them, and he figures out Clarity is actually a winnower statue. It is unclear what the veiled statues that exist inside of the pyramids and other similar darkness-related entities are. So for the purposes of this, we'll call them a winnower statue. But he finds one of these statues encased in a bit of an ore. I've played some of the Halos. I watched Brian David Gilbert talk about the Halos at some length, but I have not actually played them myself, except for Halo Infinite, which feels like an oversight on my part, but also just they were always... Halo Infinite, that's the one where Master Chief comes back, and Cortana was evil in the last one, but now she's not. It was actually... Well, he was away.
Oh, man.
And then he had a new Cortana who was kind of like sassier, but the real Cortana was evil, except the real Cortana wasn't evil, wasting a huge plotline they set up for the past 3 games. No, she wasn't even evil. She turned out to not be evil, and she just wanted Master Chief to not be sad, so she cloned herself in a Forerunner facility or a Precursor facility or whatever it's called in Halo, and just decided to fuck off and die after that, and just went, here's your new dog. It's identical to me, and she still has a 7-year lifespan. Good luck the next time you have to play through this problem. It's just unbelievable. Her name is Weapon. Why the fuck is her name Weapon? You could have named her anything else. She could have decided on her own name anywhere else.
I've only played the first 2.
The Exo were created further by using Vex mind fluids, Vex radiolaria, Vex milk, which was harvested from Vex who were coming through a large portal on Europa, since Europa was a Vex-dominated space. Now, this meant that Clovis Bray had to capture living Vex and extract their radiolaria, which is an incredible problem and a very stupid thing to do because Vex are ontologically infectious. The presence of Vex nearby means that nearby things will start turning into Vex, and it is unbelievably dangerous in that regard. So he figured out that if he took some of that Vex blood, which is unchanging, he put it in a light robot, which was self-healing, and he cut the Vex blood with a little bit of darkness, which was in fact clarity, he could end up with a living robot. And that is why we cannot let the AI win, because if AI is going to be going anywhere, it's not going to be led by ethical researchers, it's going to be led by Clovis fucking Bray. Listen to me. Look into my eyes. We can't let this happen. He will get to Europa, and when he opens up that Vex gateway, if nobody's there to stop it, Elsie Bray is not going to save us this time, and Banshee hasn't been born yet. It's up to us to stop this. Thank you all for listening to my talk about Destiny. I hope you had an excellent speedrun. I'm leaving now.
Have a good one. It looks like Okami has cleared the wall.
Yeah, Okami winner somewhat far and away.
Yeah, they got stuck on Harpy 2, Electric Boogaloo here on this stage that was spitting out the noise machine. But everyone else had a lot of tech trouble with the game not running.
Apparently this one has some issues I've been navigating.
Yeah, so 2 or 3 of the players were having that. They couldn't get past stage 2 even when they did. Oh man, I love Discount Firebrand up there for Jaspertine. I love that for him. Anyway, this is a tough game. Kickmaster. But Okami did really well, made it through level 4 by the end. Thanks for joining us for Destiny, Lord of the Rings, Halo, and Dragon Ball Z, and Kickmaster.
Wait, I thought that was StarCraft.
It might be. I'm not sure. I've only played StarCraft 1. I don't know that the lore changes in StarCraft 2. There might be a lot of martial arts in StarCraft. It might be a fighting game for all I know.
Okay.
StarCraft 1 wasn't, but I guess if you were playing like one of those dudes with the claws, you could fight a Hydralisk and... That sounds fun, actually.
I heard StarCraft doesn't have any lore, so it's good that we didn't bring that up. Anyway, I'll see you later. Bye!
Later. Hey, thanks for joining me, everybody. We are calling the race mostly due to tech trouble, but